Welcome to my video about using Realisable IMan, an integration middleware, with Sage 300 to automatically create AR receipt batches, uploading detail of documents paid by ACH or just providing a source file of some sort to create detail on the Sage cash receipt batch side. This is Mark Binkley. I'm with DataQuest, and we are a longtime consulting group for Sage 300. In this video, we will go through how the IMan system automatically creates the AR cash receipt batch, first by examining the source data, in our case, a spreadsheet, and then looking at how the AR cash receipt batch automatically got created by Realisable IMan, and then how Realisable IMan also created an output file explaining any shortages or overages for each document that was referenced to be paid, along with the amount paid in the document. So let's begin by looking at the IMan job canvas. IMan runs through a browser in terms of the user interface to use a WYSIWYG representation to create a series of transformation steps to transform data from whatever its source is to the ultimate destination, and in our case that's Sage 300, and then finally produce an output file for the reconciliation detail. So what you're seeing here are each of the nodes for some process that happens against the data, beginning with, in this case, the Excel spreadsheet, and then moving through a process that then collects the data from the spreadsheet and pushes it into a SQL table, then does some validation against that data, and in this case, that's the open receivables. So for those amounts that are referenced as the paid amount against each document, we compare that then to the outstanding balance that sits in the Sage accounts receivable for that particular document, and then make a decision about how we are going to apply the cash, whether we're going to take a discount if there's early payment, whether the balance on the document might be less than or greater than the amount paid in the remittance from the customer, etc. And all of those are then stored in this temporary SQL set of records for this particular remittance, and then output ultimately to a spreadsheet, so the final reconciliation against the detail can ultimately be reviewed by the individual responsible for posting the cash receipt batch. So this particular solution is likely meant to be used in a situation where there's really high volume for outstanding documents being paid, and perhaps the remittance comes to you either as a list provided by your financial institution for maybe an ACH remittance, or perhaps directly from your customer by email or some other form to get a list of that which was paid. So what we're going to do is ultimately produce an output that is the reconciliation document. So IMan is capable of storing a template for how you want an output to look. And that's what we're seeing here. We have an initial title row with filtering preset on this spreadsheet. And then IMan will call up this AR batch template that's stored in a particular location in your environment, use it to create then the final outlook, which we'll see later in the video. The starting point of this process is to create a input file that gets picked up by the system. And we're using some folder structure to control inputs and outputs generated by the integration manager system. So in this case, we have inputs and we have a template file that is an example of the record detail that we might use to tell IMan what cash receipt batch to create in the Sage system. So here, let's take a look at this example file. And what we're seeing is a simple 5-column spreadsheet that can be pasted into, and then IMan would use this spreadsheet every time in this format to create the AR cash receipt batch. So what's important about this file is it will pick up, of course, the deposit date. And for each individual deposit amount, then the grouping value needs to be designated here. So in this case, this customer has sent a payment for 5 different documents. Therefore, the grouping for this customer is all 1. And the reason we need this separate grouping besides just customer is that might be that there could be multiple remittances for the same customer in a single file. So we want to make sure we anticipate accommodating that. Then each document that was paid, row by row, and then the dollar amount paid per document or credit taken for that document. So now that we have a file ready for upload, let's look at what IMan can do to process that file. In this case, it will actually on demand allow us to go pull this file if we use the schedule now function. So that's what we're going to do here, but just note that you can automate this process so that it happens on some frequency that you establish. Every few minutes, every certain number of hours, daily, etc. Configure that, and IMan will respect that schedule and run accordingly. In this case, we're just going to leave it at frequency now so that it immediately executes the job. What we're seeing over on the right now is the job actually processing. So we've gotten a result now that AR cash receipt batch 16624 has been created in the Sage system. It has processed 2 entries, and then it also has created this audit list of every step that we've told the transformation step to stamp an audit event in our log. So this is the way that we are helping troubleshoot the job, should there be any errors along the way, or just understand where we are in the overall process, especially with very large transaction volume, which is a great reason to use IMan, of course. So ultimately, it gets to the point of job completed successfully, and then an audit email is also sent by the system. So I've directed this email to go to me, and you can see that it has sent to me the same results that we just saw inside the IMan interface. Purpose being that were there any errors that needed to be dealt with, details about those errors would be here, and an individual who's responsible for monitoring the success of this job running would be able to react to this email with anything that needs to be done to the file to get it to be correctly referencing any elements of data, or maybe a customer is inactive on the Sage side, etc. Let's revisit our source spreadsheet and just point out a couple of things. Notice that the document number ending in an X here was intentionally made to be different and incorrect. And we're going to look for the result of that in our system. And that our amount paid values are going to be slightly different in a couple of situations, which we'll review in the batch that got created. So if you remember, we got notice that batch 16624 got created in our system. So if we go look over in our system for batch 16624 and open that batch, and we'll notice then that on the individual entries for that batch, we have some unapplied cash. And if we were to compare individual documents to see the amount paid versus the current balance on the transaction, we would see there was a difference of $8.13. We'll look at that detail when we look at the final output spreadsheet that tells us exactly why that $8.13 exists. But in the second entry, if you recall, there were a total of 3 entries referenced in that grouping, but only 2 got applied, leaving an unapplied balance of $36. This is because that individual document number that ended in an X does not exist among the outstanding documents for this customer. Therefore, it left that amount as unapplied. So finally, as you can imagine, if we're dealing with hundreds or maybe even thousands of document details in order to understand everything that has happened here, the person responsible for receivables would benefit from some detail around what was the reason that short application happened in any of those situations. So we have some outputs that are available to us now, and we can see here those that got created, and the system automatically suffixed the file with the corresponding cash receipt batch number, so I know which report to look at for my detail. So if you recall, we had $8.13 unapplied, and that is because we had a difference between the amount that was originally due on the transaction versus the amount that was applied, because there was a discount available and that discount did get taken, yet the customer paid the full amount. So in the rules of the way that this was set up, this is how the result needed to be handled, and someone could go in and make the decision that either the discount is not going to be taken or they're going to leave that as unapplied cash on the account permanently. Another situation is that maybe the original amount of the document in this case was $29.90. However, there was only $22.42 outstanding to be paid. And so that $7.48 was left outstanding in the unapplied cash on that transaction. Versus the situation where in this case, that document didn't exist at all, and there is a error handling column here with some logic behind it. Says the reason that that particular record encountered an error and nothing was applied. So that doesn't show up in unapplied cash because in this case, that document number could not be found in the Sage database. Therefore, there was no decision around whether to apply it, partially apply it, or handle it in any way, because the document was not found. That's also why it does not show unapplied cash in this column for that document. And then finally, one of the other possibilities is that in this case, $36 was paid, but $36.49 was actually owed. So it is being pointed out here that there was a short payment of 49 cents on that particular record. So that's our solution for automating a remittance detail being